What is good, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I wanted to break down what's happening with NIO, Tesla, SPY, and the overall market. I'm also going to talk about what we should be watching for going into tomorrow as we have more data coming out, not to mention a reaction from Jerome Powell's speech in FOMC. But just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $1,000, you're guaranteed 15 in total. Not to mention an 8.1% APY on invested cash. The offer ends very soon in just a couple of weeks. Anyways, now let's talk about what's happening with the markets in NIO. So, looking at NIO, we still have this head and shoulders like structure, but we managed to hold $5 for today. And now we're just kind of trading sideways. So, NIO saw this dip all the way down to about 5, got rebought to about 5.3, came back down to 5.1, back up to 5.4, back down to 5, and then back up to 5.4. So it's going back and forth right now. We'll be watching some key resistance levels to see if NIO gets that bounce. If we break 5.36, I could be looking for a rebound in NIO to fill this gap back up to 5.6. If we reject that 5.36, we're looking for a dip back down. Keep in mind, we have this gap to fill down here at 5.02, so we'll have to see how well NIO holds up. It's going to be a very, very big test going into tomorrow. But let's first talk about Jerome Powell and the broader markets, and I'll talk about what's happening with my predictions. Just know this. Today, the market was very, very mixed. We saw tech hold up. Finance was a little bit weaker, and then most sectors were pretty much just weakened, except for consumer durables. Consumer durables had like stocks like Tesla that were holding up. A lot of EVs held up nicely, even after Rivian gave their earnings. That's why the share prices are actually in the green. So in terms of our economic data, just know this. We had Jerome Powell giving a speech today during the press conference of FOMC. He was very optimistic about the economy, saying that things are doing quite well, and the market ended up pushing upon, as time went on. For tomorrow, we have the Michigan Consumer Sentiment data and Bowman giving a speech, but everything is going to be quite minor. During Jerome Powell's speech today, he basically announced that the Fed cut rates by about 25 basis points. This is exactly what we were expecting. There was a 99% chance of this potentially happening. On top of this, Powell did mention the importance of him keeping inflation in place, maintaining a target of 2%, and simultaneously protecting the labor market. He also mentioned that the economy is very, very stable. It's in a very, very good place. And that got investors more excited. He was questioned about a lot of different things involving former presidents, or current president, Trump. Basically, when asked if he would resign if Trump were to ask him to, Powell said he wouldn't because of the fact that it doesn't really work that way. He still has time left until his reign basically ends. But there are other factors involved because you have to get, once again, entire board's decision on that. So that's what he's basically implying. So it's not the end of the world. Obviously, that is what's going to have to happen. The president just can't force someone to resign. That's the chairman of the Fed, just like that. It requires a longer process and a bunch of different things. But Powell's going to try to keep his job for as long as he can. I also don't presume that Trump will just make him resign. I think that Trump will just pressure him to cut rates more, and that's pretty much it. So we'll see what happens. Besides that, Jerome Powell was very optimistic. He was going on about how the economy is strong, and he mentioned that we don't have to really worry too much about yields being elevated because it's a bit of an exaggerated move. With that being said, he was very optimistic about the economy. He gave good views, and the market liked it, which is why the market pushed. Besides that, we also have some earnings that came out. In the morning, I went over Moderna, which had a nice beats on their profitability. So that was better than expected, which is why Moderna saw a nice push. And then for DraftKings and Rivian, we saw some interesting results. Rivian has been dumping quite a bit the last few days. Now it's starting to push after earnings have come out. They missed on the third quarter expectations. There was a difference in their revenue. They had a net loss that was narrowed to about 1.1 billion, however, which is better than expected. So some things were good. Loss per share was at 99 cents, a little bit below what we were expecting. Revenues at 874 million. It's not the best of earnings, but they did reconfirm plans that they're going to try to get a modest positive gross profit during the fourth quarter of this year. And that's why the share price ended up going into green. So a little bit good guidance came out for Q4. That's good for Rivian, despite the fact that they kind of missed on earnings. DraftKings also had so-so earnings. They actually had a nice beats when it comes to their overall outlook. They did reassure it. However, just know this, their revenue was down about 10% year over year at 103 versus 103.99 million. So that is what it is, guys. with that happening and with a little bit of a dip right over here, that's the reason why we saw this little shift right here. So that's why we saw the share price dip, because the revenue is not as great as what we were expecting. Despite that, we still saw some pretty solid growth, and we'll see how things go moving forward. For more data involving the options chain, just know this: for tomorrow, we have about 324,000 of these calls expiring, and we have over 725,000 of these puts expiring with the 2.24 put to call ratio. So that is once again looking a little bit more in favor of bulls because of the fact that there's a lot of shorts expiring. NIO's strategic adjustments and positive financial outlook support a buy rating. According to Jeff Chung from Citi, maintaining a buy rating for NIO with a price target of about almost $9. That was bullish news that came out, which is part of why NIO ended up bouncing. So good piece of news for them. NIO is also talking about their power swap stations in Europe, opening their 20th in Norway, once again continuing to grow and build that community. That's great news for NIO. McGuire gave NIO an outperform rating, and we did see volume go up just a little bit, so not bad for NIO. Price price ratio is kind of flat, and we do have a tendency to be in green about 53% of the time on Fridays, so it tends to be a good sign for us moving forward. What is my prediction for NIO? We look more bullish now since we're holding this support here. We have a double bottom, but we're going to be looking for this big test at 5.36. Tomorrow, look for a push for 5.36. If this breaks, we go up to 5.6. If not, we're going to be looking for rejection. As of right now, it wants to push a little bit higher, but just be careful. We are range bound, but it is looking a little bit stronger after FOMC. So I do believe there's a good chance it tries to push a little bit higher. So look for an attempt to get to 5.36 or above, and we'll see what kind of reaction we get from there. But overall, it's doing a good job. For SPY, we're bullish, but just know this: when you look at this wedge that SPY was in for the last couple of months, we're back in the wedge technically, and we're about to approach where this trend line happens to be. So I presume we could push a little bit higher for basically five. It depends if we can hold above 595. As long as we're above that, I think 598 to 600 could be coming. So we could push a little bit higher tomorrow morning, but then once we hit this resistance, very, very close to 598, we might be looking for a rejection and move back down as time goes on. So a pump and dump could be coming tomorrow, a little bit of a slowdown as the day goes on, especially because volume is slowing down on SPY. Look for more upside in the morning and a slowdown in the afternoon. 598 could be tested, followed by a dip back down to 595. For ES, we're already at the psychological 6,000. Could be pushing for 6,025 or above for a little bit higher price action. We are seeing momentum slowing right now. So it might push up here and then start dipping back down to 6,000. If not, the 5,950 areas. Look for a pump and then a move back down as time goes on. As far as stocks like Tesla go, we hit 300 very, very well. We could retest 300 in the low 300s. And then as time goes on, we might see this slow down a little bit. It is due to pull back a bit. And we could be on our way back down to 290. So look for more upside for 300. Might try to break above that, go a little bit higher for 302 to 305. And then we could be dipping back down. For Nvda, we're trying to push back up for this 150 target. We could be pushing for 150, but just be careful because there is a bearish divergence developing. We could hit 150 or get very close to that before we start dipping back down towards 148. For Bitcoin, we pumped very nicely. We're looking for 77,000 as resistance. Our main support's down here at 74,750. We could pop a bit for 76,000 before we start dipping back down, and we could be on our way back down to the lower 75,000 area, so give this the time it needs. For NQ, we pushed up to 21,250. Might go a little bit higher, but we are a little bit overextended here. I think that we're going to push a little higher. So watch and see an attempt to get back up to about 21,300. And then as time goes on, we might see this slow down and make its way back down to about the 21,100 area. So look for a little bit more upside just as things progress. I think there's a good chance this tries to push for those next resistance areas before we see some more sellers return. So watch and see if that ends up being the case. For the QQQ, we look more bullish. We're looking for basically 513 as our resistance, not to mention 516. We might be pushing for the 515s before we start slowing down, and we could be dipping back down for 510 or below, not to mention 507. So look for 516 and a potential rejection back down to 510 as the most likely moves, and we'll see how things end up progressing. For Aapl, we look more bullish. We're looking for basically 228. Eventually, 230 is our potential targets. I think we might be pushing closer to 230 before we start to slow down, so be careful on Aapl there. But nonetheless, it looks a little bit more bullish for now. For the IWM, we look a little bit weaker compared to the broader markets, especially since we have this gap below. So I think we could be retesting 238, but then we might slow back down to 235 as time goes on and remain range bound. Coinbase pumped very, very nicely, but just be careful that we've pumped so hard so fast. So now it's trying to consolidate very close to about the 260 area. It's possible to go a little higher, but then we might be tipping back down to some balance at 247. Pump and dump is also what I'm anticipating. Amazon pumped quite a bit. It's trying to struggle to break past 210 to 212. So I think that it's going to retest 210 to 212 and start dipping back down to 207 as the most likely cases. We pushed on Meta all the way up to about 595. We could be looking for a retest of 595 to about, if that breaks, we're looking for 600. We might pull back a little bit first before it continues higher. Look for a retest of about 580 to 585, before it tries to bounce up higher to try to fill these imbalances. For Microsoft, we look more bullish, might cool off to about 423 before it tries to bounce again. And Google might do the same thing. It might be looking for a target of about 184 before it starts to slow down. So look for a little bit more upside. With that being said, guys, that's what I'm seeing, at least for these charts. I just want to say I really thank you guys so much for listening. NIO has been doing a good job at holding up, so I do anticipate a little bit more upside now. It's been stuck in a range, and instead of losing 5, it's now trying to rebound. But even if we do rebound, the head and shoulders still remain, so there could still be downside risk coming later on. So look for a little bit more upside. We'll see if we get a rejection. With that being said, guys, I thank you all so much for listening, so please have a great day. I will most definitely see you guys in my next video in just in about a day from now. So have a great day and peace out.